The city stretched before them like a story of two worlds, towers of glass reaching skyward, shimmering with ambition, while the streets below hummed with the rhythm of traders and children playing among the dust. Smoke from cooking fires mingled with the smell of polished floors and new paint, a reminder that progress and tradition walked side by side, often uneasily. Somewhere above, the unseen eyes of ancestors seemed to watch the unfolding dreams of men and women, whispering warnings into the wind, their wisdom lost to those who forgot the soil beneath their feet. Amara moved quietly among the market stalls, her hands folded over her rounded belly, her eyes gentle as she nodded to familiar faces. Known for her patience, her kindness, and her ability to listen when others only spoke, she was a river whose depths no one could measure. Even in her simple cloth and worn sandals, there was a presence that drew respect, a strength not announced but lived, quiet as the first rains on dry land. Kofi Mensa, meanwhile, strode through the city like a man who had tamed the sun itself. His tailored suits, polished shoes, and confident gaze spoke of power and ambition, but beneath the surface, hunger for recognition gnawed at him. Every deal, every handshake, every toast among the elite was a step away from his roots, away from the voices of elders who had once guided him with caution and care. Pride, subtle yet firm, shadowed the soil from which he had grown. In the marketplace, whispers floated like seeds on the wind. "She is too ordinary, too quiet, not enough for a man like Kofi," women said, eyes sharp with judgment, tongues sharper still. Men shook their heads, secretly envious or approving, and the gossip wrapped itself around Amara like a vine, a constant reminder that the world saw her value not for her heart, but for what she lacked in wealth and show. One evening, under the wide sky, the elders gathered at the edge of the city. Their voices rose softly with the wind, carrying warnings as old as the hills themselves. "Pride eats the man who forgets his roots," murmured one. "The river that forgets its source dries in the sun." Their words, gentle yet heavy, hinted at consequences not yet seen, consequences that even wealth could not erase. Amara would kneel at the threshold of her small home, hands pressed to her belly, murmuring prayers into the night. Her heart carried dreams of love and peace, of a family united under care and understanding. Each prayer was a seed, fragile yet full of hope, a new life waiting to bloom despite the storm clouds that sometimes gathered overhead. Meanwhile, Kofi's gaze lingered on Zola, the woman whose laughter shone brighter than sunlight, whose every step was adorned with glamour and fascination. The temptation of her world, the parties, the dresses, the applause, pulled at him, stirring desire that blinded reason. He felt a shame he could not voice for the simplicity of Amara, for the quiet love she offered. Yet the allure of the flame was intoxicating, and in the silence between duty and longing, the first cracks of betrayal began to appear, unseen yet deeply felt. The day Kofi spoke the words, the walls of their home seemed to shrink, as if the very roof mourned the breaking of what had been sacred. "Amara, I cannot. I must leave," he said, voice brittle, shaking under the weight of decisions that would scar more than hearts. The elders' teachings, the whispered prayers of mothers and fathers, the invisible chains of tradition, all were shattered by a single act. He offered no comfort, no explanation that could heal the wound. The child she carried, a symbol of hope and continuity, was caught in the crossfire of ambition and desire. The community learned of the divorce as if a wind carried the news to every corner. Women shook their heads in sorrow, clutching their infants as they murmured, "How could a man forsake the one who carries his child?" Men, once his allies, frowned and fell silent, their respect faltering under the weight of public shame. Gossip spread like fire through dry grass, but no words of justice came from the city leaders. Silence hung heavy, a reminder that moral failure could be witnessed but not always corrected. At the village gathering, the elders spoke with voices like thunder rolling over hills. "He who betrays a pregnant woman will find his path shadowed by the unseen," intoned the oldest, eyes burning with ancestral knowledge. "The spirits balance what men cannot, and pride that crushes the humble will meet the reckoning of eternity." Even the youngest among them trembled, feeling the invisible hands of fate stirring in the wind. Amara listened quietly, her hands folded over her growing belly. No tears escaped her eyes, no anger twisted her lips. Her dignity formed a shield around her heart, unyielding and calm. The weight of rejection pressed upon her, yet she bore it as one carries water from the river, steady, careful, and necessary. Strength, she knew, was often silent, and her silence spoke louder than any shout could. As she walked away from the mansion, the sky darkened and the wind rose, whistling through the empty corridors of wealth and power that no longer welcomed her. Clouds gathered like morning veils, and rain began to fall in hesitant drops, echoing the sorrow within her chest. Each step carried the pain of betrayal, yet the storm mirrored her inner turmoil, reminding her that grief was natural, and the earth itself recognized injustice. She returned to her humble home without complaint, leaving behind the glittering illusions of a life that never embraced her heart. The narrow path back was familiar, lined with the smells of home-cooked meals and dust warmed by the afternoon sun. Though she had lost wealth, she carried more than material possessions: resilience, patience, and a vision for the life that she would still build. And beneath the quiet strength of her resolve lay a hidden truth, a secret that no eyes had yet perceived, a story of depth and power cloaked beneath simplicity. The woman who walked silently through storms held more than the community could ever imagine, and in time, the world would come to see that which had been invisible all along. The wedding shone with gold, light bouncing off crystal chandeliers, while music filled every corner of the hall. Guests danced, drank, and toasted to Kofi and Zola, their laughter echoing like thunder over empty fields. But the elders were absent, their customary blessings unsaid. The wind seemed heavier, carrying whispers of disapproval, as though the old spirits of the land had watched from afar, shaking their invisible heads. "A marriage without the voices of the wise is like a tree without roots," an old merchant murmured, casting a wary glance at the couple. Days blurred into nights of opulence. Tables overflowed with delicacies, silver clinking under bright lights, and the city's elite praised Kofi for his daring. Yet, beneath the applause, a hollow echoed in every corner of their home. Zola's eyes sparkled with admiration from strangers, yet when she looked at Kofi, there was little warmth, only expectation. "More. Bring more wines. Let everyone see what we can command," she demanded, voice sharp like broken glass. The celebrations had no end, yet joy remained absent. Zola admired only her reflection in the mirrors that lined their halls, each one framing her beauty, her dresses, her jewels. "I must look perfect," she whispered to herself one evening, brushing her hair as if it held the power to keep Kofi's attention. Her laughter was like bells without sound, a hollow echo hiding a heart that never learned to give. Kofi, lost in her glamour, failed to see the emptiness behind the shine. Coins flowed like water from Kofi's accounts, pressed by Zola's demands for extravagance. "Invest in this, buy that, nothing is too small or too large," she insisted, pointing at yet another venture she had read about in glossy magazines. Slowly, cracks appeared beneath the polished floors, debts accumulating, business plans faltering, warnings ignored. Kofi, blinded by pride and desire, spent without pause, believing wealth could shield him from consequence. The elders, who once guided him like the sun guides rivers, began to turn away. Their voices, once a steady drum of wisdom, grew silent. "He forgets the soil from which he came," one elder said, shaking his head. Friends distanced themselves, refusing calls and invitations. The community watched in quiet despair as the man who once balanced ambition with humility now drifted, untethered and blind to tradition. Kofi's empire, built on ambition and the sweat of honest labor, began to wither like crops under a sunless sky. Deals fell through, partners withdrew, and the foundation of his company cracked. Pride had replaced prudence, and excess had replaced integrity. The city whispered that no light shone forever, and the empire of gold had begun its slow descent into shadow. Meanwhile, Amara, who had once walked quietly among them, rebuilt her life with no word of complaint, no cry of despair. She moved with the rhythm of patience, tending her modest home, nurturing the child in her womb, and sowing seeds that would grow slowly but surely. The world looked away, blind to her quiet strength, but beneath her calm, resilience flowed like an unbroken river. Even in silence, she was unstoppable, crafting a future shaped not by applause or wealth, but by endurance, wisdom, and unwavering heart. Amara sat on the worn wooden stool outside her small home, her hands gently resting on her swollen belly. Beside her, Mama Efua, the elder woman known for seeing beyond the veil of ordinary life, watched with calm eyes. "Child, the river that flows quietly carves valleys," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of generations. "Your strength is hidden now, but it will shape mountains." Amara nodded, drawing courage from the elder's words. "I will endure," she whispered, feeling destiny stir beneath her calm. Thunder rolled across the heavy sky as Amara went into labor, the wind lashing at the tin roofs like ancestors urging her forward. Pain tore through her, yet her hands clutched the earth, grounding her in the rhythm of life and tradition. When the cries of her newborn pierced the storm, a light seemed to break through the gray clouds. "A child for the world," Mama Efua whispered, tears mingling with the rain. Hope had arrived, fragile yet unstoppable, a promise carried in the small body of new life. Days later, neighbors whispered about the family that had been torn apart, expecting anger or revenge, but Amara moved with a quiet dignity. "I speak no ill," she told Mama Efua, brushing the rain from her child's hair. "What has passed cannot dim the future I will shape." Her heart, though wounded, refused bitterness. Grace became her shield, and patience her sword. Even in silence, she radiated power, unbowed and unwavering. One morning, elegant knocks echoed on her humble door. Polished shoes and fine suits filled the threshold as strangers asked for her attention. "We have come about the ventures you began quietly," one said, eyes wide with recognition and curiosity. Amara smiled, calm as the river, revealing nothing more than a nod. Her simple home now held secrets unseen, the first glimmers of a life that none had suspected. She welcomed them with serene composure, her mind quietly mapping investments, technological strategies, and the future of local ventures. "This project will thrive," she said, pointing to plans carefully drafted by hand and memory. Beneath her modest exterior, she understood the language of power and progress, the rhythms of wealth and influence that others craved but often misused. Each decision was measured, thoughtful, and guided by the patience that had been nurtured through hardship. Soon, the seeds planted in silence began to bear fruit. Small businesses she supported flourished, schools opened with proper resources, and young artisans found patrons in her. "The river that runs deep nourishes all it touches," Mama Efua remarked, seeing the invisible threads of Amara's labor weaving through the community. Her quiet endurance had transformed into tangible growth, unseen by those who had once judged her, yet undeniable in its results. Word spread slowly, and then with sudden clarity, the veil lifted. Amara's identity as a tech heiress became known, her contributions recognized not only in her neighborhood but across the city. People gasped at the revelation, astonished that the woman who had walked humbly among them held the power to shape empires. "She is more than we imagined," one elder murmured, bowing slightly in respect. Shock mingled with awe, and admiration replaced judgment. Yet despite this newfound recognition, Amara chose simplicity. Her wealth remained a tool, not a show of vanity. She moved among neighbors, guiding, helping, and nurturing relationships with sincerity. "I sought a life where love and loyalty are tested beyond gold," she confided to Mama Efua one evening, rocking her child. Her secret had served its purpose, revealing the hearts of those around her and affirming that true connection could only flourish where pretense was absent. Through patience, wisdom, and quiet power, Amara had transformed from a woman overlooked to a force of nature, her hidden strength now a beacon. She was proof that dignity, endurance, and vision could not only survive but flourish, even when the world looked away. The wind carried the whispers of the past as Amara stepped into the grand hall of her company, the air heavy with anticipation. No longer the quiet woman who bent beneath misfortune, she now moved with the certainty of a lioness claiming her territory. "This is the moment we shape the future, not just wealth," she told her gathered team, eyes fierce yet calm. Every gesture, every word, radiated authority born from endurance and vision. She had awakened, and the world could no longer ignore her power. The company she built was not merely a machine of profit, it was a river that lifted every village it touched. Schools flourished with new resources, artisans found patrons, and clean water systems reached forgotten lands. "Let our work be fair, let it honor the people," she said to her directors. Technology became a bridge, and each innovation carried the heartbeat of community upliftment. Her legacy was not counted in numbers, but in lives changed, in hope restored. Soon, the empire of progress spread like rain on parched soil. Investments bore fruit, ideas blossomed into realities, and even those who had doubted the quiet woman now spoke her name with reverence. The balance of justice, long disrupted by greed and arrogance, was returning. Kofi's once mighty holdings crumbled as mismanagement and pride consumed them. Where one had fallen, another rose, not through vengeance, but through purpose and patient labor. The people gathered, bowing not to gold, but to a leader whose humility matched her power. "She leads without pride," murmured an elder, watching Amara guide her team with gentle command. The community saw her worth, felt her integrity, and honored her wisdom. The respect she earned was deeper than admiration. It was the recognition of true authority born from resilience, patience, and moral strength. Meanwhile, the halls Kofi once ruled lay empty. Contracts expired, markets faltered, and whispers of his downfall echoed through silent offices. "How did it come to this?" he muttered, watching figures of dust replace the towers he had built. His empire had crumbled, not from outside enemies, but from the weakness of arrogance and poor leadership. And when he turned to find comfort in the only woman who once shared his flame, Zola's absence cut deeper than failure itself. The shining woman who had promised loyalty now drifted away, leaving him to the emptiness that mirrors the sky above a fallen man. The illusions of love and wealth dissolve together, revealing the stark truth. Pride and selfishness yield only ruin, while humility, patience, and justice endure. The sky stretched wide and empty above Kofi, a gray canvas that mirrored the hollow ache in his chest. He walked the silent streets of the city, each step heavy with regret. The laughter and lights of the past, the feasts and applause, now seemed like echoes of a life that belonged to someone else. In the stillness, he felt the weight of every choice, every betrayal, and the faces he had abandoned haunted him like shadows at dusk. Alone under this barren sky, he understood the meaning of emptiness. Then, whispers reached him like the rumble of distant thunder. Amara, the woman he had forsaken, was no ordinary soul. Tales told in hushed tones revealed her secret, her brilliance hidden behind humility, her quiet strength now visible to the world. She is more than I ever imagined," he murmured, trembling, as if the truth had struck him with the force of a storm. The treasure he had scorned, the life he had ignored, shone brighter than any wealth he had ever held. Memories collided with revelation, and his chest tightened. The weight of betrayal pressed down upon him, not only against Amara but against himself. He saw the full cost of arrogance, the shattered family, the trust broken, the dignity lost. Each failure bore the imprint of his own hands. He fell to his knees, dust rising around him, and whispered, "I have become the man I once feared to be." Pride, once his throne, now lay scattered in the dust at his feet. A deep resolve stirred within his sorrow. He would not linger in shame alone. With careful, humble steps, Kofi decided to seek her, not as a man of power, not as a CEO whose fortune had crumbled, but as one seeking forgiveness, seeking the grace he had once scorned. Each step toward her became a journey toward redemption, toward understanding what it meant to honor those we love. When he arrived at the gates of her grand headquarters, his heart quivered. These were the halls he had mocked, the corridors he had believed were beyond someone like her. Yet here he stood, small against the grandeur, a fallen man before the woman who had risen with dignity. Inside, Amara moved with quiet authority, no trace of bitterness in her eyes, only the calm, commanding presence of one who had endured and grown. He saw the contrast between the woman he knew and the queen before him, humble, patient, wise, and powerful beyond measure. They faced each other in silence, the air thick with history, pain, and unspoken words. Pride and patience, arrogance and grace, met at last. Kofi's gaze dropped, unable to meet her strength, while Amara observed him with the quiet depth of one who understood the language of hearts and the passage of time. In that heavy stillness, the journey of reconciliation and redemption had begun. Kofi stood at the edge of the courtyard, his shoulders slumped as though carrying the weight of 1,000 judgments. His fine suit hung loosely, the tailored lines unable to hide the tremor in his hands or the hollow look in his eyes. Where once he had walked with the arrogance of kings, now every step whispered hesitation. Dust clung to his shoes, the ground itself seeming to mark him as diminished, a man stripped of crown and pride. He muttered, almost to himself, "I have built nothing that lasts, only shadows." Across from him, Amara remained still, a presence calm yet commanding, like the river that carries both life and quiet strength. She did not speak, but the air around her was heavy with unyielding dignity. Her gaze, steady and unwavering, met Kofi's with a weight that spoke louder than words ever could. In the silence, he felt the truth of her power, rooted not in wealth or status, but in resilience, patience, and the wisdom of enduring injustice without surrendering one's spirit. The memory of his betrayal pressed upon him like the drumbeats of a long-forgotten ceremony. Every decision, every choice that had strayed from loyalty, resonated in the space between them. Marriage was not merely a union of hearts, it was sacred, a promise witnessed by ancestors and guided by the unseen threads of fate. And yet, he had abandoned this bond, leaving her with emptiness where there should have been trust. The sound of his own guilt echoed like a drum in his chest, relentless and accusing. He remembered the swell of her belly, the life growing beneath her heart, a life he had cast aside without thought. The injustice of it, the cruelty of pride, stung sharper than any worldly loss. "I sought only recognition. I traded love for illusion," he whispered, eyes dropping to the dust beneath his feet. Outside, the storm softened. Thunder rolled gently, and rain tapped softly on the windows as if nature itself had bent to listen, to acknowledge the weight of truth now filling the air. In that moment, the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for reconciliation that might never come. Amara's eyes, calm and unyielding, carried the unspoken justice of her heart. No words passed her lips, yet every glance reminded Kofi of the cost of his arrogance, the sacredness of what he had lost. In that silence, he understood the full measure of consequence, not in punishment, but in the quiet strength of the wronged. The lesson was clear: dignity and loyalty endure, while pride and deceit crumble under their own weight. The fire of anger had long since cooled in Amara's heart, but its mark remained, a scar invisible to the eyes yet heavy in her soul. She did not speak to Kofi, nor did she rush to forgive. Her silence was not weakness, it was the measured strength of one who understands that time and truth must first settle in the spirit before forgiveness may grow. She held her head high, eyes steady, as if the very air around her carried the wisdom of generations. A small, fragile cry broke the tension, and Amara lifted her child into her arms. The infant's tiny fingers grasped at the world with innocent curiosity, unaware of the storms that had shaped the lives around him. This child, a living echo of love once broken, shone as a quiet reflection of what had been lost, yet also of hope that persisted despite betrayal. Kofi's breath caught in his throat as he looked upon the child for the first time. Joy and regret collided in the same heartbeat, twisting his chest with the bitter sweetness of what he had allowed to slip from his hands. He whispered, barely audible, "My child," and for the first time, he understood the depth of consequences that no wealth or charm could erase. Amara's gaze met his for a fleeting moment, full of clarity. What is lost cannot be fully reclaimed. The past, like smoke, cannot be gathered again, and some wounds, though healed, remain a reminder of choices made and trust broken. Yet, in her wisdom, she spoke softly, her voice a river of calm strength. "You may be part of his life, Kofi, but you will not take the place you once thought was yours." Her forgiveness was measured, not granted in haste. It was a gift tempered by experience, guided by love for the child, and rooted in the dignity of self-respect. Kofi nodded, shoulders bowed beneath the weight of his own shadow, finally understanding that some lessons are lifelong. He would walk forward carrying both the joy of his child and the memory of his own failings. And in that measured acceptance, the land of their hearts found balance once more. Amara, holding her child close, chose herself without bitterness, a woman who knew the power of love, the strength of restraint, and the freedom found in walking forward while leaving betrayal behind. Kofi walked through the dusty streets of his old neighborhood, the grand towers of the city now far behind him. He carried no briefcase, wore no tailored suit, and his shoes bore the mud of the earth he had long forgotten. Each day was a lesson in patience, each interaction a reminder of humility. He listened more than he spoke, worked steadily, and discovered a respect he had once thought beneath him. From gold to dust, he learned the true weight of beginnings, the value of integrity, and the quiet strength found in simplicity. Far from the glare of luxury, Amara's company flourished. Each contract she signed, each partnership she nurtured, was measured not by the profit it promised, but by the lives it touched. Communities once ignored by the glittering city now thrived under her guidance. She distributed resources like gentle rain on dry land, teaching those around her that wealth is best measured in hope and opportunity, not coins counted in secret vaults. Amara walked through the growing offices, her steps calm and steady. Leaders turned to her not out of fear, but out of respect. She ruled without a crown, without flamboyant display, yet her presence commanded attention. Kindness tempered with wisdom, patience tempered with purpose, this was her power. The community called her queen, not because of wealth or inheritance, but because her deeds spoke louder than any proclamation. Elders gathered under the shade of the old baobab, their voices carrying the story through the village. Pride walks fast but falls hard, they said, their words weaving through the market streets, teaching young and old alike the cost of arrogance and the treasure of humility. Children listened wide-eyed, and adults nodded, recognizing the truth in their own hearts. True wealth, Amara reminded all who followed her, lives not in the eyes of the crowd, but in the heart that chooses compassion over greed, patience over haste. Destiny rewards the patient soul who walks the path of truth. And so, beneath the great tree that had weathered countless storms, life returned. Seeds planted in silence grew into strong saplings, sheltering new dreams. Beneath its shade, hope took root where pain had once lingered, and the land learned to breathe again, guided by the quiet, enduring strength of those who had walked humbly through fire.